Psychology is the new firewall, where human insight trumps every trick. We're not hacking systems, we're hacking behaviors so you won't click. No complicated code, just tried and true brain science at play. Social engineering for good, the best defense is in your mind today.
Hello and welcome to Phishing for Answers, where the carrot beats the stick and we flip the script on the bad guys, turning humans from easy targets into the strongest line of defense.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast belong solely to the hosts and guests and don't necessarily reflect those of their employers or sponsors. We're seasoned security professionals, but this is a conversation, not a custom consultation. Need specific guidance? Reach out to Joshua Crumbaugh directly.
Get ready. Phishing for Answers starts right now.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Phishing for Answers. Today I've got Steve Tout, the author of CISO on the Razor's Edge with us. Steve, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into cybersecurity, all that fun stuff.
Sure. Thanks, Joshua, for having me. And first of all, that intro video was off the hook. I love it. I'm going to have to find that so I can share it with my team and replay it.
All right.
This, this conversation, I think is really timely and really appropriate. A little bit about my background and what I'm currently doing. I think, I got started in cybersecurity by accident. It was, I was a developer.
A lot of us did.
Yeah. My career aspirations were that I wanted to be a developer, and I worked on a team at one of the big telcos, and we suddenly got asked to evaluate a single sign-on vendor, and one thing led to another. I was, supporting that, became one of two LDAP administrators for, one of the big telcos websites. Then got recruited to lead identity management implementations for one of the major banks, and then got and the story goes on. But it was an career track that I couldn't have designed for myself. I just kind of pursued where the opportunities led, and let that unfold, and here we are.
Awesome. No, that's actually a fairly common story because, cybersecurity wasn't this thing, this career path that we could just choose. At least not when I was going into school, information technology, yes, to some degree, even that was still a bit of an emerging field. So, but I guess I'm dating myself. Anyway, we're here to talk about you. So I'd love to start. In your book, you say that it's more of a diagnosis than anything else. Tell us about the diagnosis.
Yeah, well, I described the first half of the book as diagnostic, and the second half is a bit more prescriptive if cybersecurity leaders are looking for the escape hatch on the place that they've landed on in their careers. And I'm, very early on, make the disclaimer that, hey, I'm not a CISO. I've worked around them and with them and for them for quite a lot of years. And I just clear the air that, this is, a book that I wrote from the perspective of, hey, I just finished producing season 1 of the Candid CISO podcast. And I heard 12 cybersecurity leaders in 2024 describe a lot of the challenges that they were facing, like Rinki Sethi, who got ejected from one of the major social media sites after it was acquired, somewhat disruptively. And if there's one theme that could be summarize the diagnostic part of the book, is that everything is changing all the time. There's a line by Logan Roy in one of these epic media shows called Secession. And that line that he delivers, that there is no line, everything is changing all the time, just really struck with me. And I struck me and stuck with me, that that really is true to life. And whether you're succession planning for a major CEO role or in leading cybersecurity programs. So there's one chapter in the book that was inspired by a conversation I had with Steve Zalewski that also sums it well about the comorbid uh, um, symptoms of cybersecurity leadership. And the diagnosis isn't about the shortcomings of the CISO. It's about they exist in an environment that is stacked against them. And the subtitle of the book is, it's leading cybersecurity when the system is designed to break. It's a bit, tongue in cheek and provocative, because it makes you stop to think, well, was the system really designed to break? And I I offer that tension point, like there's an emergency uh, hatch. There's the CISO is viewed as a scapegoat, if you will. And I think those organizational design choices and leadership structural choices are not by accident. But I don't write to create more conspiracy theories. I write because I'm trying to be clear-eyed and honest about the assessment, and then spend a fair amount of time in the book describing solutions rather than just complaining about the problems.
Yeah, I mean, I think our entire sector or industry still has a lot to learn and a long way to go. So I think a bit of it is, a work in progress, no matter what. I mean, it's sort of like medicine, no matter how advanced it is at this point, they're still learning every single day. So I see cybersecurity very similar, and it's only getting more and more complex when you add things like general purpose transformers into the mix, and all these large language models. Whereas people really don't understand how they work, and we're talking about the people that develop them don't fully understand how they work, and I think that even in and of itself is going to lead to its own class of vulnerabilities, and we're already starting to see some of those, like the one we saw with Gemini. But it really is a fast moving world that any CISO's in, and really anyone in cybersecurity in general.
Yeah, without a doubt. I see the CISO path splintering a bit. Some of the CISOs are recasting their role as the chief security technology officer, or they're going down a data path and becoming the chief data officer, or down the AI path, recasting it as the chief AI officer. And I think there's probably a trend that I see to escape the liabilities of the role, but still maintaining a bit of the authority and the foresight about securing the organization and the foundations, which I'm fully supportive, right? Because I believe in accountability, but I also believe in a shared responsibility model where I think it's unfortunate and a bit unfair that a lot of the blame falls on CISOs when they don't have the power or the resources to make the changes necessary to help an organization actually improve their security posture.
I mean, yeah, that their job title starts with chief, but rarely are they in the C-suite. And I definitely see that as an issue. Whereas they're often VP, they're answering to somebody in the C-suite, and that is not the same. But yeah, no, I definitely see how it's a difficult job, and we see that there people don't last long. They stay in it for a few years, and then ultimately they end up becoming a field CISO or something like that, because there's not the liability or the stress that comes with the job. Okay, so let's pivot a little bit. Before we started, you said you had a little bit of I forget the word you used, maybe it was contrarian take on phishing.
Nonconformist. My first
Nonconformist
podcast was
take
called the
on,
Nonconformist
yes.
Innovation Podcast, and yeah. Innovation is a form of rebellion, as it is, and yeah. So nonconformist was the word.
Love it. Okay, so what is your nonconformist take on fishing?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was, listening to some of the past episodes, and as it relates to the organizational aspects and the environmental aspects that I write about in my book, I think the real key here is that we look at, phishing and then do some analysis and like, oh, the user did this and the user did that, and they don't have the awareness or they don't have the skill. And it's like, I think my whole, when I zoom out to like do, scan the environment, I wouldn't place the blame so much on the user, right? I mean, they're doing what they know. Here, let me share this story with you. Like, I was advising on a cybersecurity company. I won't name the name. 225 million or so in ARR. They had been affected by the SolarWinds breach, and I was consulting, and they were running some, awareness campaigns, and I received an email that was actually quite convincing in terms of being real, that it was, the exact nature of it was, here's a link, you can go view the company store and buy, logoed merchandise like a hat or a pin or a t-shirt or
Yeah.
whatever. And I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of like this company, and let me see what is in their merchandise store. And it on at first glance, I obviously I clicked through it, so I didn't see that this was a phishing awareness campaign, and I wanted to see the gear because maybe I'd like to sport the logo. But I fell
It
for it.
happens to
Yeah,
all of us, by the way. The well, we'll go there later. Continue, continue.
yeah, sure. So I mean, it was a learning because I got to see, just how like realistic these are, and more on that later. But coming back to, we tend to like try to correct the human behavior, right, through training. And like your video in the beginning was about the psychology, which I agree. But if you're tracking the KPI as the success of the number of trainings that you've held, 100% of all the employees took it, right, isn't really the right metric. I think to focus on.
I I
I I
agree. I,
I
I like reporting the best personally.
Yeah. So directly, I mean, I think that the phishing awareness is shouldn't be a one-time annual thing, a one and done. It's really a cultural and a leadership value of what outcome are you trying to achieve, which is increasing the level of engagement and concern and skill of end users to protect themselves and their data. And I think if it's something that you do once a year, you tend to forget it. Or um, if someone clicks on the link and then you mention that person's name, like, hey, on a team meeting or on a company all hands, like, yeah, we had 56% completion this week, but Joe, had an interesting story, because you tend to create a culture of fear and shame of like, oh, I fell for it,
I agree.
versus empowerment. And that's my conformist view, which is that we should, not be trying to compel behavior change through fear or shame, but cooperation and dignity, of dignified response when an event does occur. And
So
that has to be reflected by the leadership values.
I agree completely. A couple things I might add there around phishing. Number one, I don't think the goal should be to get people to click. I think we should start with easy, obvious stuff so that it's easy to get for them to notice it and report it. Because at the end of the day, I want them to report it. And I think we should slowly and gradually make them more and more difficult. And the reason is because we want people not to fall for it. We don't want to discipline people. We don't want people to feel bad about it. But we do want them to get that, for lack of a better term, muscle memory that comes with it. And so when somebody falls for a phishing simulation, if there's really good just-in-time education that comes at the moment that they realize their mistake, all of a sudden we get essentially a human virus definition. They get this instinct that will kick in the next time they see something similar. And so to me, that's the reason that we do it, but we have to do it in a positive, constructive way. And one of the things that I think we need to do there is tell our users we're going to fish them, make it a game of cat and mouse. It's so much better than this blind testing where sometimes they don't even know they fell for or they clicked on a phishing simulation. And I think that's probably one of the most critical things that we can do is make sure that they know it was a simulation, make sure they realize their mistake, and that we're teaching them, hey, watch out for urgency or authority or whatever at the moment they realize their mistake. Because to me, that's when, well, not just to me, I mean, psychologically speaking, that is when we're going to get the highest retention because there's an emotional response happening.
Your intro video is powerful for a couple of different reasons, and you hit on one point, which was about the the assault on the psychology or the cognitive layer, right? It's no longer about the perimeter that we're trying to protect, or even about a user's account or their credentials. There's social engineering, there's phishing, and that's why I think it's so important, right? To when we're thinking about the metrics and what success looks like, that it's continuous. It's not just a report card that the CISO should, deliver to the CIO or the board once a year. It's how continuous with tools like AI that we have now, right? It's like how is AI enhancing the awareness continuously, and that should be tracked maybe more as a metric than the human performance, right? And then the resilience of, hey, if this does occur, our is our organization prepared for that? Like how to respond in a way that protects our data, in spite of something that looks compelling that a user happens to click on.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I really think that we really have to give a lot of thought to what is our goal before we run a phishing simulation. There are, risk assessments, penetration tests where maybe you need to do some blind testing. But there's also awareness training. And the vast majority of phishing that we do is part of an awareness training program. And that means that you're going to go about it a little bit differently. And it's not just about tricking people anymore. But yeah, I personally, when I'm looking at the KPIs around it, the thing that I care the most about is what percentage of those phishing simulations that I send out are being reported back to me, because that is an indicator of culture, whereas anything else doesn't tell me about my culture.
There was another concept. I think I shared this with you in the planning, right? And to take this even further from a nonconformist perspective, right? If we're fishing, it's like usually it's the CISO or the security team that is raising awareness and conducting these campaigns against the rank and file and against the individual contributors and the organization. And I wrote a blog post and in a couple of other places about we do these kinds of simulations and even red teaming against our own infrastructure, but the leadership is not immune to this, right? There's, I think, as much an even greater need to run these simulations and tests against the C-suite as there is against the individual contributors. And so I introduced this notion of, if cybersecurity is a leadership issue, we should maybe be focusing more time on it, right? What about penetration testing our leadership?
Yeah.
can not just their inbox, but are they resilient as a team, or are there constant battles and struggles between the CISO and the CIO for power, which is typically something that I see. And
I've seen
if the
it. Yeah.
team can't keep their shit together, we have a bigger problem than, are we going to be, as a user, going to be susceptible to a link? So I step back and look at this whole broader picture of, phishing, not just the inbox, but the leadership as well, and pressure testing that.
Sorry about that. Muted myself for half a second because I thought I had it muted. Anyway, okay. I want to rewind to something that you said a little while back. You were talking about how it has to be continuous when talking about awareness. There's an actual formula for behavior change. Well, there's a number of them. But the one that I like the best comes out of Stanford's Behavioral Science Laboratory by a guy named BJ Fogg. And it says that if I want to achieve any specific behavior, I have to motivate people. I have to make it super easy for them to do whatever I want them to do. And then I have to remind them about it constantly. And it just says behavior equals motivation times ability times prompting. And it's that prompting, that continuous education that I think is the number one thing that is missed in cybersecurity. We I've heard so many talks about motivating people that I know that we're talking about motivation, but what we're not talking about is that prompting, that continuous reminder, because most people are not like you and I. You and I might think about cybersecurity completely on our own, but the average person is not going to.
Yeah, I agree. And the way AI works now, I mean, most teams have Slack or Teams or Google Chat. We should see the opportunity. I think smart organizations are building security bots that present contextual, just-in-time reminders, that are continuous in the sense of, hey, every 7 days or every 3 days, but they're also uh, looking at the behavioral profile of users engaging in potentially risky activities, and that person needing more reinforcements, if you will, right? Like that person may need 5 reminders in a day versus someone who doesn't normally engage in risky behaviors, maybe 5 in a week. So
Yeah.
continuous and intelligent and empowered by AI tools right where users work inside of their Slack or Teams or Google Chat.
I completely agree. And I think that's one of the beauties of AI is that we have the ability to give the computer the ability to think like a human. And that's where we can say, hey, be careful. This exhibits some behaviors that may be risky. And I really am excited about those contextual cues because I think that that's going to do more to drive culture change in organizations than really anything we've done up to this point.
Yeah, if you have end users that are, looking at leaders who don't care or who aren't going through the same training as them and feel the same struggle, they're probably going to just not be inclined or care as much to go do anything more than they need to. Right.
Yeah.
So on the incentive aspect, if you look at this as a measure of incentives, like why should I care to spend an extra 5 minutes to read this summary of why this was a phishing attempt and what I can do to protect myself better? There's if you think about lead by example, of how leaders should care instead of being dismissive, both towards risk and towards employees. I think this leadership style, like the player coaches that are going through it, that are in the trenches with their teams, are going to demonstrate the behaviors. And this is, again, a leadership and a cultural issue that um, tools can't touch, right? Tools can do great
Yeah.
work, but they're only going to get you so much if you don't have leaders that believe in what that model the behavior that they want to see.
Well, and I think you need your cybersecurity leaders. And when I say that, I'm not talking about your CISO, your head of the SOC. I'm talking about your head of sales who is really charismatic that you can loop in and make an evangelist for the cybersecurity team. But to your earlier point, it all starts with the CEO. Um, when I was doing penetration testing, almost always we would have at least one person in the company who was exempted from it because, well, we don't want to offend them, and I still see it to this day, less so, but I still see where we're exempting people in the C-suite, often without them asking to be exempted. I will point that out. But we're exempting people in the C suite when they need to be the very tip of the spear. And the example I like here is the gift card scam. I mean, we should not still have successful gift card scams happening, but they're still successful in
Hmm.
2026. And the
Hmm.
reason they're successful is because the first time that employee ever hears from the CEO, it's in that text message or in that email that they got asking for the gift cards. If that CEO had been the tip of the spear, and had recorded a video stating, "Hey, I will never ask you to buy gift cards," or whatever, right? And that was just brought into the onboarding process. That would never happen. To me, it seems like it's the easiest thing in the world to eradicate, but it's still a very simple, what I would consider to be lazy fish, that is still effective in today's day and age. And I just think it's a really great example of why we have to have that top down leadership because the C suite drives the culture. And if they're not driving that culture of security, um, ultimately they'll end up regretting it.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I've had a number of consulting clients, and like, when it comes to like AI tooling choices, for example, where one person in the C-suite is allowed to, use an unapproved tool, maybe from a vendor that hasn't had a SOC 2 report or whatever the case may be, and everyone else, is expected to follow a certain pattern, and it's a situation where there shouldn't be any kind of curiosities or questions around why uh, security performance is rising, like increasing and improving, or it's declining, because it's with leadership, with architecture, with zero trust. I've heard it said that there's a third kind of company, that there's a company that's been breached, a company that who hasn't been breached and who doesn't know it, and then the third kind of company is a company that won't get breached, and it's one where um, it's just is the philosophy represented in the architectural choices that are made, and the way that leaders and end users stick to their standards and their policies, and model the behavior, and that makes data breaches optional, to be provocative, or as a point of conversation, right? Is I think the phishing, the vulnerabilities, are all something that we're aware of, but how much time and effort and resources that a company wants to invest into making them optional is up to them.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Um, Pivoting a little bit, I thought I saw something in your book about bad design. And I want to get into that a little bit because I also really think bad design is one of the biggest obstacles to truly secure organizations myself.
Yeah, I mean, to create the illustration, I mean, there's this idea of the Reuben vase, right? That if you, it's this picture of like a figurine of horses on a face on two sides. But if you um, defocus, then you may just see a figurine. But if you the way you focus, you're going to see two faces of horse, two horse faces, and it's one where you can't focus on the foreground and the background at the same time. That's the exercise of the Reuben vase. Sometimes it's a picture of people, and you get it's in black and white. So it plays a mind trick on your eye, where you're either drawn to see, um, you know, like a figurine or picture of people. And the design, when it comes to design thinking or systems thinking, is that you have environmental considerations that organizational design, organizational structure, and to put it simply, I've said in the past that, I believe that technology is simply a manifestation of the values and beliefs of the leaders. And if there's a data breach, right, that's some reflection of how some cybersecurity leaders, might value returning profits to shareholders versus investing in modernizing their consumer identity and access management system. So it's about, design thinking to me is about the trade-offs between the needs of shareholders, the needs of end users, the needs of customers, and it becomes apparent, right, where the priorities are, but not, I take the, position in the book that you shouldn't just pin all of the problems onto the CISO or complain about the end users all the time. If you're creating an environment that's toxic or that doesn't empower users to think or function more securely, then they aren't the ones to blame. At some point, it just comes full circle back to this idea that leaders are creating the environment for their employees to either succeed or to fail. And that's an opportunity that they should take more seriously, right? So I create a framework that maps out strategy, governance, economics, and eventually technology. And so to me, the design thinking follows that pattern. It uses, for um, a reference like the McKinsey 7S model or a balanced scorecard approach. And I just created um, a variation of that for my own thinking to help me look beyond and even reverse engineer um, technology, right? Like, where did we get here? And if you think backwards, right, strategy informs politics or governance. Politics and governance informs economics, and then the economics informs technology. So that's the kind of systems thinking. It's multidisciplinary. It traces back to alignment across team boundaries, across program boundaries, across business units, all the way back to the founders or the executive team that set the strategy into motion.
I like it. The one thing I wouldn't say add to it, but just mention is I think the most critical part of design is about the end user. If we want users to do anything securely, there is one fact that we've learned time and time again in cybersecurity, and that is that if the most secure option is the easiest option, that's what the user is going to do every single time. It becomes the default. And so I think we have to think about how easy are we making this for the end user. And that to me is the reason that I love passkeys, because we took something that was annoying and difficult for users, like passwords, and we replaced it with something that's easier, like biometrics. And that is how we drive, to me, better cybersecurity out of our users.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. However, the thing you have to keep in mind is that there is a learning curve, and it doesn't necessarily get easier immediately. Like for me with
No, it
passkeys,
doesn't.
you
Yeah,
know, like
passkeys were a bit of an implementation for us too.
yeah, even on end users, like I needed to like think, where do I store these? And I set up my password manager to be the vault for those, and it's something I needed to pause and slow down and think about before presented with like two or three prompts a week now. Do I want to save my passkey for future use here? And I'm like, at first it's going to throw users off, right? And I think that's part of the training, that easy doesn't always mean the fastest solution, but after you learn a new way of doing something and it becomes a routine or firsthand because you've done it 5 or 50 times, that it's if it takes 3 or 5 extra seconds, it's still an easy task because it doesn't take 30 seconds and it doesn't take 1 second, but 5 or 10 seconds for making sure you save your passkeys in the correct location for future use, is a good investment of time, right? That secures you and sets you up for and your organization up for success.
Oh, and you're right. Without a good change management program around whatever it is you're going to be pushing, it'll fail every single time. Because users have a knack for misunderstanding things. One thing I found interesting when I did penetration testing, if we ever got caught on the fish, it wasn't because some user thought that, they were going to report it and they saw it as suspicious. It was always because they had questions and they didn't understand something. So they forwarded it to somebody internally that we didn't want to see it. And I think it just goes to show that, if there's if you've got 100 people and there are 100 different ways that you can interpret that, chances are you're going to get at least 99 of those out of your 100 people. So that that change management really does help to calm that anxiety around your user population.
And
Well,
in
go
smaller
ahead.
organizations, that is kind of it could be a scary term, but to put it simply, it could be a call to just communicate clearly and regularly versus assuming.
That's
And
all it
that's a
really
great
is,
way to
right?
start, right? Yeah, I mean, there are more programmatic ways to, like with ProSci and measurement, and to implement change management at a program level. But the first step is to just take assessment of the clarity of your communication to your peers and to your teams, and get a report card on that. Because if you don't communicate clearly, that could become an obstacle to whatever kind of security measures or changes that you're trying to implement.
Yeah. And if you've got communications or marketing, let them help you. They're really good at communications. So, well, hey, we are out of time today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Where can they find your book?
Well, there's a link and even a way to have a conversation with my book at stevetout.com. My digital twin is
Right.
there. There's links to the book. There's links to some articles that I write for CIO, and more information about me is there as well. And
Cool.
on LinkedIn, if you want to just look up Steve Tout there, I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Very cool. First time I heard the idea of the ability to talk to a book, but with today's day and age and agents, why not? I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much. You have an amazing day.